Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Ethos Online. Again, this is a space where we can be, belong, and become the very best version of ourselves. And so, again, we just want to thank you for joining us in these deep studies. We're one of the few organizations that actually really delve into the Bible, not just looking at verses, but we go deeper. We ask the questions of who wrote it. Who was the audience, right? What time period did this happen in? We do hours and hours of study just to prepare for each one of these. And so we don't take this lightly. And in fact, our camera crew, everybody works really hard to make sure we get all the right slides just perfect for you. We do a lot because we believe the Bible is so important. There's so much beautiful stuff here that it's worth spending a little extra time on. And so every week we share these videos and we hope that you enjoy them as much as we enjoy making them. And so today we're going to delve back into, you guessed it, Genesis, right? We have quite a few more chapters to go, but already you can guess we're at chapter 17, and it has been so much fun. And I've had a couple of you reach out and say, man, I can't believe we've only hit 17. But the truth is, for many rabbis and people who take this study of Torah seriously, it could take years and years and years of study to get through Genesis. Because again, this is not our language, right? Most of us don't speak Hebrew, especially biblical Hebrew. And so in people who are studying to be rabbis, right, they will spend countless hours delving into this book, looking at every word, all the context. And so this is why, again, it takes us a whole section just to go through a couple of verses sometimes. Today, we're going to go through the second part of chapter 17, and I think it's a doozy. Actually, we're going to go through the first part, and then next week, the second part. We're going to break it up because, again, really interesting stuff. So before we move into it, a reminder of the context of the whole of Genesis. Genesis was not a history book. So again, we have to remember this. They were not writing literal history. You know, when we sit down in history classes today, right, in our high schools, junior highs, colleges, we pick up books and we study these pieces because we look at literal history, how it happened. We look at dates, time periods, very real stories, scenarios. That's what we do today. But for the Hebrews, when they were writing Torah, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, when they're compiling all these stories, they were not thinking we need to hold on to our history. For them, there was something so much deeper. They were writing because they were afraid in the middle of Babylonian captivity, 587 BC, right? They're saying, how do we hold on to our identity? And so they compiled all the oral traditions because they were afraid that they were going to assimilate, just like all the other tribes did. They did not want to take on Babylon's gods, its stories, its values. They wanted to keep Hebrew, Hebrew. And so that's what they do. And so they compile these beautiful oral traditions, all of it into these scrolls. They have poetry, mythology, prophetic warnings. They have king's messages to their people. All of this in order to make sure that Israel stays Hebrew, right? Monotheism versus polytheism. All of these elements, all these values they hold onto. And they do it by compiling all of the oral tradition of the past. And they bring it together. And so one other point that's really important to remember, Israel, every time you're reading through these stories, remember, Israel sees themselves in the story, right? They're not just reading it and saying, oh, interesting figure here, Moses, Abraham. They're looking at it so much deeper than we do today. They see themselves in the story. They see their nation. When they read the story of Abraham, they're not saying Abraham, they're saying Israel. When they see Moses, Israel. Adam, Israel. Noah, Israel. They see themselves in the story. And so we are talking again about Abraham. That's where we are in the story. So Genesis chapter 17, today we'll read verses 1 through, I believe, 10 or 11. 10 or 11. So here we go. Verses 1 through 10. And Abram was 99 years old. And God appeared to Abram. And he said to him, I am the Almighty God. Walk before me and be perfect. Yeah, we'll get into that. And I will place my covenant between me and between you, and I will multiply you very greatly. And Abram fell upon his face, and God spoke to him, saying, As for me, behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall become the father of a multitude of nations, Abram. And your name shall no longer be called Abram, but your name shall be Abraham. For I have made you the father of a multitude of nations. Verse 6, and I'll make you exceedingly fruitful, and I'll make you into the nations, and the kings will emerge from you. And I'll establish my covenant between me and between you and between your seed after you throughout their generations as an everlasting covenant, to be to you for a God and to your seed after you. Right? He's really talking at Abraham here. And I will give you and your seed after you the land of your sojournings and in the entire land of Canaan for an everlasting possession, and I will be to them for a God. And God said to Abraham, and you shall keep my covenant, you and your seed after you throughout the generations. This is my covenant, which you shall observe between me and between you, between your seed after you, and every male among you be circumcised. So that was a mouthful today, right? But we're going to delve through some of this, and I think it's going to pop a bit because there's really some beautiful depth to it. So here we go. Let's look at verse 1. And Abram was 99 years old, and God appeared to Abram. Now, I remember growing up with this, right? Abraham was 99 years old, and I remember thinking, like, I have grandparents who are 70, and I can't imagine them having kids, right? And then you get into this whole conversation about, well, maybe they were, sin, because sin was not as bad as it is today. People would be degenerated, blah, blah, blah. We know archaeologically that's just not the case. We know this. And so was he really 99 years old? Right? Was Sarah as old as she was? Well, the answer is, of course, to look at this story as a Jewish person would look at it. And if you are a Jewish person, you are not asking the question, how did a 99-year-old, they didn't have Viagra back then, they didn't have the blue pill, what are they doing? How are they doing it? No, that's not even on your peripheral, right? If you are a Jewish person, this is your book. This is directed toward you. You are the audience. Your rabbis have for centuries interpreted this piece. You already know. You've picked up on this because numbers have very real symbolic meaning. And so the number 99 is just another one of those numbers that if you're Jewish, you make the connection. Look at what Rabbi Cummings says. He says this, the number 99 is most often metaphorically connected to the wisdom and growth one obtains after a long journey. Right? Think about this. You've taken trips before. My family and I, we've taken many trips, and we learned so many things about each other, right? About the road, about our car. Boy, we need to keep our oil changes. When you think metaphorically about your own journeys, when you look back, there are these moments in time where you think, man, if I could have done it differently. But the truth is, that's garbage thinking, right? You weren't ready for that yet. You had to experience it so that you could have wisdom later on. And so this is the point. Abraham has experienced these moments, right? He was 16. He's driving the car. He's making mistakes. Now he's 70, 80, 99. He's experienced the moments where knowledge took place because he made some mistakes. He's grown. He's experienced wisdom. That's the number 99. And when I think about the number 99, I think about our culture right now. Our culture today is super, super focused on being young. I looked up the stat. This was fascinating to me. 24 billion, I said billion, right? $24 billion a year are spent on products to cover up age, to make you appear younger. $24 billion. Right? If we used even like a quarter of that, we could potentially stop world hunger, right? There's so many things we could do with that money. But what we do often is we try to cover up our age. Because in our culture, age is something to feel embarrassed about, right? In our culture, we don't really value wisdom very much. We pretend the old aren't even there. I had a friend, uh, younger friend, one of my students. She said she works at Walmart. And she said at Walmart, there are these greeters, and oftentimes they're older. And she said she was talking to one of the greeters one day. She said she just loves this older lady. She comes there every day, always smiling. What she noticed about the older lady, this greeter, was that most people, when they walked past her, completely ignored her. And so my young friend asked her one day, how do you do it every day? How do you keep a smile on your face? She said, you know what? Most people just walk by me and ignore me. But every once in a while, someone will notice me. When I smile, I will see them shift and change and smile back. And that's enough for me to keep going. But what I found sad about that whole story was that this woman every day is told she is not even there. She's not visible. And I think often that's because we as a culture, we like to pretend it away. If we notice someone old, that reminds us we're going to get old or we're getting old. And we like to pretend it away. Whereas Hebrew people, they looked at it differently. For the Hebrew, someone who is older, someone who is 99, the greeter at Walmart is someone you go to in awe and reverence. Right? You go to those people, you're asking them for coffee, to go out to have coffee, and you're seeking their wisdom. It's interesting that so many of our celebrities, right? So many of the people we look up to today for advice and all of this, they're young. And the truth is, they're young and often inexperienced. Or if they've had some experience, they don't have the deep wisdom of someone 90, 80, 70 who has gone through life, right? We don't value wisdom much in our culture. I found this interesting. Proverbs 1:7. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. Notice this, though, about that verse we just read. It said, God appeared to Abram at 99. Because here's the thing. When we seek wisdom, when we spend time with people who have been there, who have traveled the journey, when we spend time with them, when we ask them questions, when we sit at their feet and get advice, God appears. Think about that. God appears when we show up and we seek wisdom, when we've experienced it, when we have had the aha moments, when we've made a billion mistakes and we're able to look back and say, I have grown. That's when we see God. That's when we see God fully. It's so beautiful. Let me keep going. And he said to him, I am the Almighty God. Walk before me and be perfect. Now, I want you to remember, perfect was not really an idea until you get to the Greek culture. So this is a word, perfect, that has been translated, right? It's been interpreted, and in English, we have the word perfect. And perfect has a lot of baggage, doesn't it? Perfect in our culture means we don't make mistakes, right? We have it totally down. We're sinless, right? Those are the words that often come up with perfect. But in the Hebrew, the word perfect actually has some interesting connections. The word perfect, you could say blameless, but it's bigger than that. What this was the word perfect meant you are one of us. You are the in crowd. You are the people who belong. So think about this. If you read this differently, look at what this would say. And God appeared to Abram and said, I am the Almighty God. Walk before me and belong. That is heavy. Walk with me and belong. Walk with me and be inside the circle of what? Yeah, life, right? Where life abundantly happens. Walk with me and belong, find connection, find life. This is what that word meant. Nothing to do with being sinless, perfect, any of that stuff. That's all Greek and Roman, right? That's first century thinking. That is not ancient Hebrew. Yeah, that's so good, right? Walk with me, belong, experience fullness, connection. Now, if you're also Hebrew, you'll also know that this idea of belonging, fitting in, being in the circle also had a ritual connection to it. And the ritual, of course, which we'll delve really deeply into next week, was the idea of circumcision, right? And it brings us up toward the end of the chapter, of course, and the end of this section that we're reading. But circumcision, this is this ritual that basically shows this is my commitment, my connection to my tribe. And so for Israel, like any other tribe during that time era, they had rituals that showed they belonged, just like we do today. And so again, identifying marker, not the idea of perfection, any of that. This is basically us today. We have our politics. I'm an ass or I'm an elephant, right? I root for the Lions or I root for the Bears. I cover my face. I don't. I'm vaccinated. I'm not. Whatever. BLM. All lives matter. I don't know. Whatever your thing is, right? We love to segregate, be in our own groups. This is the idea. This was an identifying marker to say this is Israel, right? Babylonians are not circumcised. Israelites are. These were identifying markers that were really important to them. So we'll delve into that later on. But just know that that word here, perfect, lots of mileage. There's a lot of stuff to consider when you think of this word, perfect. It's been interpreted perfect, of course. So here we go. We'll keep going. And Abram, verse 3, fell upon his face, and God spoke to him. This idea of humility. Abraham, first off, he doesn't fall on his face because he's afraid. I think a lot of people miss this. They assume God is scary. God is terrifying. And Abraham, in the presence of God, he just falls down. He's scared. He's terrified because God, if you look at his face, you might die. Not the point here. Abram is not in fear of God. Abram is in awe of God. The idea is very different. There's respect here. To be in awe of something is pretty deep, pretty profound. Not confused with fear. We are to honor God, right? Be in awe of God, not fear. So I wonder for you right now, what are the moments you would say, I was in awe? For some of us, it was that wedding day. You saw your husband or your wife in that dress, right? Or that tux. You were in awe. You saw a baby born for the first time. You climbed that mountain and you got to the peak and you saw the sunset or the sunrise or just saw the view. You were in awe. These moments of being in awe, this is the idea here. Abram sees God, experiences God, and the response is not fear, it's absolute awe. It's that moment your breath is taken away and you're like, wow, I get it. This God is this thing we're always chasing and trying to name. It's so much bigger than I ever thought. This is that moment for Abram. Everything is bigger. It's so good. He is in awe. He is not afraid. And your name shall no longer be called Abram, but your name shall be called Abraham. Why is this important? I mean, it's close enough. Abraham. I mean, truth be told, I've been calling him Abraham before we got to chapter 17. What's the big deal? Abraham, Anthony, Tony, right? What's the big deal with this? Well, again, if you're Hebrew and you've read Torah and you've lived in that time period, and the Hebrew tribe is your tribe, this is deep. Deep, deep, deep. Think about this. Abram to Abraham. This is what one interpretation says of this. One very ancient Jewish tradition says this about it. The resh that was in his name, originally denoting that he was the father only of Abram, which was his native place, whereas now he became the father of the whole world. Do you see that? When you experience God, there's an elevated moment, right? There's this elevation of, I'm here, but now all of a sudden things have gotten bigger, right? You asked the questions. You went down the rabbit hole. You saw the bigger picture. You climbed the mountain. Now you see the world. This is the moment. And when you experience that moment, life shifts, doesn't it? You had the awakening. You took that pill. You went down. You took the Red Bull. You went down this bigger picture. You've seen it, And it's so good, and you can't undo what you've seen. And so when you do, your identity shifts. And so Abram is not just the father of Abram, right? Just this tiny tribe. He's the father now of the world, right? This is such big language. Is he really the father of the world? Well, no. This is just bigger metaphorical language. He was this, now the world has shifted. It's gotten bigger. He sees so much bigger. And so this is why, again, a name shift is really important to the story. Jacob to Israel, deceiver to overcomer. So again, Israel sees themselves in the story. So Israel was deceptive, broken, going down the wrong direction, right? And then has the moment, the experience, the growth. And now Israel is on the top of the mountain, looking down, seeing the world, is now the overcomer. The name shifts. We have Simon to Peter in the New Testament, right? The shift. Before it was just one who listens, one who just kind of does their thing, oftentimes doesn't listen well, right? But a static character in the story. Whereas after he experiences Jesus, notice this, he's the rock, which means, again, a very similar connection to Abraham. He is the foundation, the father, the founder. Yeah, so good, right? The follower to the founder. Pretty heavy, right? This is Israel's story. This is what is told. Jesus makes the example here. And he says, basically, now it's time to live in it. You've gone through you've gone through the journey, and it's been rough at times, but now you've experienced the moment, the growth, the change, the shift, and now you have a new name. You have a new purpose. You have seen the world, and now that you've seen it, you have wisdom. And now that you have wisdom, you can share it. There's nothing scarier, more nerve-wracking for me when I hear someone speaking and I know, and again, I love young people speaking. I'm always drawn to it. I think it's exciting, but I also have to question sometimes, where's this wisdom coming from? If it's not coming from an experience, something you've experienced yourself and grown and shifted, then oftentimes it's a borrowed story. And borrowed stories are good. But I want to hear where it came from. I want to hear the one you're talking about. And this is the shift. This is the change. Israel, you have to move through the story. You have to experience it yourself. And once you have, your name changes. It's so beautiful. We all have different names, right? Names we've been given at birth. But as we grow, as we mature, more in our journey, as we grow and we climb the difficult journey, we climb the mountains, we earn certain names, don't we? We earn these names, these traits. And so we become an overcomer, right? We become a father, a mother, a daughter, a lover, a friend, a teacher, a doctor, whatever the thing is. As we grow, our names get bigger and bigger and bigger. These identifiers, if you will, bigger and bigger and bigger as we experience life. We move from 20 to 30 to 40 to 80 to 99, right? And we grow, and as we do, we share the wisdom with those who will listen. And the story goes on 6 through 10. As you share, as you grow, as you give the wisdom, you exchange the wisdom, you continue moving on in your journey. It says we are blessed. Right? We embrace the new us, we accept the names, and then we experience the blessings, right? We experience it fully because we're ready for them. Some of the things when I was 20 that I thought I needed, I wouldn't have been ready for. I'm 30, 40, now I'm 41, and I'm looking now and I'm thinking, this is so rich, and I'm ready for this thing. But there are some things I know I'm not quite ready for. Right? Wisdom will get us there. So good. This is Israel's story. As you grow, as you shift, as you change, as you experience wisdom, your name gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So good. I hope you enjoyed that. Here's what I want to do. How do we take it home? What do we do with this? Well, here's what I thought. How do we accept something new, right? Accept the new you, the person you become. I started kind of tooling around with this idea of what would that look like? How would I take steps to ensure that I could accept this new person I'm becoming? So here's the first one I thought of. Number one, focus on your positive qualities. As you begin to change and shift, think about the new you, but also these positive things that have emerged in your life, these traits you've taken on. Here's a great quote. This is Germany Kemp. When you focus on being the best person you can be, you draw the best possible life, love, and opportunities to you. I think this is so true. Every time in my life that I've grown, shifted, and I've identified those things, oftentimes I'll find those things, those opportunities get bigger and bigger too, once you identify the growth you've experienced. Number two, consciously prevent negative thinking patterns. Consciously think about it. That stuff will pop up. But if we can remember we've been on this journey before, right? If I can identify, oh man, I've been there before. I've gone down this cycle before. It didn't help. It didn't lead me anywhere. There's actually a new approach, a new tool I've picked up, and I can use that to shift the way I live. Here's another great quote. If you are positive, you'll see opportunities instead of obstacles. And it's a great quote. But when you're young, when I was young, this didn't mean much to me. As I've grown and experienced more in my life, I'm beginning to get it. Those obstacles, they were positive things because years later, they became tools that have enabled me to shift and change and create new patterns. It's not always a bad thing. Another thing I thought about was accept your imperfections. We get so caught up in wanting to be Greek, Hebrew, Greek, Roman, perfect, right? Perfect, blameless, sinless, right? But that's not even interesting anymore, right? That's not a dynamic life. We change, we make mistakes, we grow from them. If we can accept that sometimes we make mistakes, sometimes I'm quick to pick up the wrong habits and breaking them is really difficult. I just have to breathe, right? We learn certain things about ourselves. Embracing those things, learning to accept them and then grow from them, that's helpful as we experience the new you. And so it's not about hiding your imperfections on a shoot. It's about embracing them and being unapologetic about them. Man, I get a little addicted to some things, right? So because of that, I'm learning I want to be addicted to exercise, diet, reading, those kind of things. Understanding that about yourself can make such a positive change. Number four, use positive self-talk. We live in a world that's filled with sarcasm, right? We're drawn to it. In fact, when people try to give us a positive compliment, many of us, we can't even accept it. Learning to use positive self-talk. Thank you. You know what? I'm beginning to say that about myself too. Thank you for that comment. Learning to say things like that rather than, oh, I'm really not that good. You know, we begin to sound like Eeyore, right? That's not helpful. Positive talk is really helpful because the more you say it, the more you believe it. It's a biblical idea, really. The way we choose to think about and speak about yourself is a choice. You may have spent your whole life talking about yourself in a negative way, but that doesn't mean you have to continue that path. What a great quote. Let me give you a couple more. Disregard what other people might think about your decisions. You know what? All my life, I've spent so much time worrying about what other people might think about my decisions. The reality is, if I would just stop and ask, what do I want? How do I feel about this decision? When you can go there first, whatever decisions you make, and when you've plowed through them and you've asked questions of them and really dissected them, when you feel good about them, you can move it and live it unapologetically. You don't have to worry about everyone else and what they'll think because you've already processed it. You're good with it and you can live it and move forward fully. Here's a great quote, Eric Davis. I don't listen to what people say about me and I don't read what they write about me. People can compare me to anyone they want to, but I'm not going to worry about it. So good. I'm not going to worry about it. I'm going to live fully in it. I've done the hard work. I don't need their approval. And so lastly, fits perfectly, a great way to end, avoid worrying. We can get so caught up in worrying. What if this? What if that? Have I really grown? Have I done this? Am I really ready for this new stage, this new name, this new experience? Stop worrying. Stop, take a breath, Remember, this is a journey. It's not a race toward an end. It's about learning to be fully on the path, enjoy the path, be present to the people around you on the path. When we can stop worrying, we can allow ourselves, we give ourselves permission to live right now. Here's another great quote. There's a great difference between worry and concern. A worried person sees a problem, and a concerned person solves a problem. What if life is all about solving problems rather than worrying constantly about them? So good. Yeah. I hope you enjoyed this. This was a lot of fun. This was a good one. Everyone, if you want to continue working with us, supporting what we do, again, we think this is so good. We spend so much time preparing for this. And so go to ethos-church.org/donate and partner with us in continuing sharing these messages weekly about this beautiful book called the Bible, right? This compilation of so much beauty and wisdom. We think it's important to share. If you want to join us periodically as we get into real groups, real time, consider emailing us about when we can join together at Ethos Living Rooms online. And also subscribe. Hit that subscribe button. Share these YouTube videos. We want to keep growing this channel. Everyone, thank you so much for joining us. Next week, we will finish chapter 17. Everyone, take care, and we'll see you next week.